So, a couple of things before I kick off this morning. So, I wanted to thank the IACD and the other organiser in the committee for putting on this amazing conference. Now, what did you call it? Wackadaka. Could you get any more Australian than Wackadaka for a conference, folks? But I did want to acknowledge the enormous amount of work that comes into putting on a conference like this, and to do a quick shout out to my team, the Community First Development team sitting up there. You guys have been amazing, and I'm really grateful always for your support and your contribution to supporting this conference. So I want to acknowledge that I'm standing on the sovereign unceded lands that the Ladakira people belong to. And I want to pay my respects to the ancestors and elders and thank them so much for their continuing stewardship of this amazing country that we're stepping on. How lucky are we, hey, to be here right now on this country. And I acknowledge that every footstep we take on this continent, we're on Aboriginal lands. I'm a Bidjara woman from Queensland, and this is not my country. And I want to thank Auntie B for her welcome. Because what that means for me, as an Aboriginal woman on this country, not my own, is that I am safe here. I am protected here, not just my physical self, but my spiritual self. I sleep better when I'm on country where I've been welcomed. It's an actual physical feeling for me, so thank you, Auntie B. But I also want to talk about what my obligation is, and you'll see why in a minute, because it's about respect. So when I'm welcomed on country, I acknowledge that I have a responsibility. I need to think right, I need to speak right, and I need to do right. I need to be respectful in what I'm saying, thinking, and doing. And I want you to remember that as I'm talking today, because I think I'm going to poke the bear. And I want you to know that I am coming from my lived experience, my truth. It doesn't mean that it's your truth or your lived experience, but I feel compelled to speak with you about it. I am talking as a First Nations sovereign woman around de-colonising development. And that's going to be a little hard to hear for some people, and I acknowledge that, but I want to have a respectful conversation. I just want to have a yarn with you around what this means from my perspective. Now, you'll notice that with the slides, I'm not talking to the slides. They're really just going to roll along in the background as soon as I can work out how to press the clicker. Great. There's a reason I'm not talking to the slides, and it's because I want to prompt your thinking today, and I want to lead you to the edge of an uncomfortable conversation, and that might not be something that you're familiar with or comfortable with. So the slides are going to roll along in the background, and they're going to talk about our amazing organisation and the way we work. And it's a safe place for you to retreat to if you just need a minute to have a think around what it is that I'm saying. I'm conscious that as an Aboriginal woman and talking about colonisation, that's not necessarily a comfortable conversation for me either. I'll try not to retreat into the slides, but you're welcome to. But I know that as I'm standing here, you might just see me, Aboriginal woman, but I'm standing here on the shoulders of giants. I am standing here on the shoulders of our elders and ancestors who have done this really important work before I got anywhere near this stage. And they've brought me to this time and place so I can have this conversation with you. So bear with me and come along on this journey. So some of you may think I'm on the wrong track today, but colonisation and decolonisation conversation is really, really important. Practitioners in this room are good people. We want to do good things as good people for the betterment of society. And actually, I'll just pause there because I think I'm going to confuse you as I start to mix up all of my pronouns. I'm speaking as an Aboriginal woman, but I'm also speaking as a practitioner, and I'm going to talk community and we, us, them, and it's all going to be interchangeable. So if I confuse you or leave you behind, put your hand up and I will correct my language. So some of you will be offended, and that's not my intention. I want to have a respectful conversation. Feel free to ask questions. Come and see me through the conference. I'm around all week, and I'm really open to talking through this. My intention is to talk with you around how we do things, not how you do things. That's up to you. I'm not in a position to do things to you or put you in a position where you are compelled to do something that you're not comfortable with. It really is just my perspective. So before we head down the path of talking about decolonising development, let's have a think about what development actually is. And I don't have the answers to this. I have an idea of what works for me and my community. We talk about aid and welfare, development, all interchangeably. We talk about program and service delivery. Is that development? Is aid development? I know there is an absolute vital need for aid, particularly if it's post-tragedy or post-crisis. There is a need for immediate support. Is that development? If we deliver programs and services on behalf of funders and government, is that development? Sometimes it is, I think. Perhaps it's not. That's up to you to decide. Development, to my mind, is the act that takes us forward. So it's not necessarily dealing with the immediate issue. It's about the building blocks that we put in place for us to thrive. So if we can start thinking about development as an action that supports the development of people and things, then we need to think about how we're doing that. And it's a big conversation. If we're delivering programs and services on behalf of a funder, whether it's government or a not-for-profit, a philanthropist or a trust, I worry around the delivery of that. You know, as development practitioners, we throw around words like place-based and co-design, but often in my experience, the program or service is already set. And the co-part of it comes into, let's have a yarn with people about how we're going to implement it. There's no conversation about whether we wanted the program or in fact even needed the program. So if we start right back at the beginning around what it's like to operate and live in a colonised society, which we still are, and then have a think about what are the basic fundamentals to strip back colonised systems so that we're not doing things to people. And these are really big conversations, right? Because it's not just us acting in isolation. It's not whether we're an NGO or even government trying to do these things. It's about how we start the conversations way, way back with our communities about what it is that we need. How is it going to be funded? And so although the topic of my conversation was around shifting power, decolonising development, I suspect I could have just called it shifting power, because there are so many elements to what it is that we do. You know, it's not just about decolonising development, it's decolonising evaluation, it's decolonising research, it's decolonising funding. And gosh, you know, how many of us want to have that conversation with funders? Not many. I don't. You know, sometimes it means we've got to reject funding, and that's hard. That's bloody hard. You know, Community First Development's a small organisation. We have less than 40 people. We're an Aboriginal development and research organisation that works right across this nation. We are primarily funded by donors from the public, by mums and dads across Australia. We get a small amount of funding from a corporate partner, and we get a small amount, very small amount, from the Australian government. But with all the people who fund us, we've had the conversation. So even that funding from the National Indigenous Australians Agency, as small as it is, I'm just going to keep plugging that. Hopefully there'll be some staff here who'll go, man, we should fund that organisation. We are funded in a unique way by government. We're not funded with specifics. We're funded to do our work the way we see fit, based on community invitation and what community has identified as their priority. So it's not prescriptive funding around where we're going to work, how we're going to work, and who we're going to work with. And I think that's a bit of a step forward for the Australian government. I don't see that in many places. And it's interesting, you know, I really want at least the Australian government to expand upon that. We know that the Australian government working in the Pacific region, or actually the Asia Pacific region, has really shifted to funding solutions for First Nations peoples through a process of longer-term funding and community-led initiatives. And yet in Australia, we're in a colonised system where that same government funds solutions for First Nations people through short-term funding and program and service delivery. Now, I'm not naive. Well, I'm naive in a lot of ways, but not on this. I know that the Australian government funds programs in the Asia-Pacific regions, not because it's a great government and has a social conscience, because it's a regional security issue. I get that. I also get that the Australian government funds programs and service delivery in Australia because they should. However, there's also a need, a desperate need, to come around to the way of thinking that it's got to be by us, for us, with us, don't do things to us. So that top-down approach is really, thank you. That top-down approach is not sustainable. I have this exercise I do with some of our supporters, and I say, just close your eyes for a sec. And this is what development or program and service delivery can feel like in Australia. So close your eyes. I'm not going to do anything scary. Now just imagine I'm coming to your door, and I'm knocking on my door, I'm introducing myself. You didn't invite me over for a visit, but I'm coming anyway. I come inside, I walk around your house, and I go, not a big fan of your furniture. I know what you need. I'm going to go and order that furniture. I haven't consulted you on what your needs are, what your tastes are, who lives there, none of that stuff. I'm going to come and I'm going to get the furniture and then I'm just going to deliver it to you. And man, do I want you to be thankful for that. You know, that feeling of powerlessness is pretty cruddy. Not only that, I'm going to expect you to be thankful, and then I'm going to go out into your garden and go, health and nutrition, I know what you need. I'm going to dig up your garden, I'm going to plant the veggies I like, because it's not about you, and I want you to be thankful about that too. You can open your eyes now. But that feeling, you know, I'm trying to describe to you as a First Nations sovereign woman, that feeling that we experience of powerlessness. And it's crippling. We want to be included in this conversation. No, more, we want to lead the conversation. Community First Development operates in a really specific way. We only work at community invitation. And when I say community, that's pretty broad, right? It's our Aboriginal communities or Torres Strait Islander communities, either urban, regional or remote. It could be a community of, a thematic community, so health, for example. So we're invited in by community. We only work at invitation and we only work on what communities identified as their priority. And more, community is the key lead in how we evaluate the program. It's got to be purposeful and valuable to the people who are doing it themselves. Otherwise, I fear we are still working within a colonised construct. So development, evaluation. Let's talk back to funding. So funding often comes to us in silos. You know, it is for program or service delivery, or funders, bless them, sometimes just want to fund for their pet cause. And I get that. If you've lost someone or you have a deep interest in, I don't know, cancer research or drink driving or whatever it is, then you want to do good in that space. But I suggest that doing good in that space would mean more and have greater impact if you go to people, to community, and see what it is that we need. And that is a hard conversation to have with funders. Siloed funding, you know, we need to move their thinking on this. Our communities, we don't operate in silos. We don't live in silos. We live in an ecosystem where everything is each interdependent on each other. And if you lift in one space, it lifts and grows success and thriving of people in another space. We can't just continue in silos. And that's really hard, you know. As a not-for-profit, as the leader of a not-for-profit, I think I'm on the hustle all the time. I go to bed thinking about funding. I wake up thinking about funding. And yet, I also have a moral obligation to make sure that whatever funding we secure supports a decolonised process of development and a decolonised process of interacting with us, building relationships, building that trust. A few years ago, when we fully transitioned to this model, we hit the wall financially. So I'll give you this as an example. I know it's bloody hard to have conversations with funders, and it might mean that you're standing there really staunchly to go, no, we're just not going to do it. So we hit the wall. We were in the process of transitioning to right-sizing the organisation to fit the untied funding that supported a decolonised way of working. And it was coming to a crunch. We were running out of money. And a significant funder came to us and said that they would fund us significantly if we changed our model back to doing things to people. I tell you what, I was looking at retrenching staff, making us small before we could grow again. It's not just about, making staff redundant. These are people I know. Their kids send me paintings from my office. It's not in an abstract. And I have to say I was so proud of our board because they stood with us shoulder to shoulder on that line in the sand and said, we would rather go out of business than change our model and work back within a decolonised process. How deadly is that? Yay to the board, yay to the team. It was tough going, but last year we received more than 86,000 financial gifts from everyday Australians. Some were small, some were large, but that's why I get to stand here, because I know this works. Working at invitation of community on what community identifies as the priority, and community initiating and leading the action is everything. It is everything. Building those trusting relationships to even have those conversations. It's hard, for our mob to be vulnerable and to show what it is that we need. Build the relationship. Don't go in and assume that you know. Don't deliver a program and service that's been designed somewhere else and only talk about implementation. The next part of this hard conversation, which might make you feel a little uncomfortable, is, do we need all of our organisations? What is the future of our organisations that are coming in and doing this work with us? What does this mean for practitioners? It's a bit of a hard one, hey? I don't know the answer to that. I know the answer for my own community. And it's not that we don't need other people, we do. This isn't a black fella, white fella issue. This is one of humanity. If we could have moved this thing ourselves, we would have already bloody done it. We're smart people. We know the solutions. We know what it is that we need, and sometimes we do need support to get there. We need some capability building of our anchor organisations. But I encourage you, please, to have a think about how to do that. We are on the edge of global change. What I'm talking about today is a conversation that's happening right across the world. I know at the upcoming AES conference, there is a session on decolonising evaluation. There's a fabulous book, I don't know if you've read it, by a fellow called Edgar Villanova about decolonising wealth. Excuse me. It's a fantastic how-to, really, on the origins of wealth, wealthy people, philanthropists, funders, and then the divesting of those funds in a decolonised way. This is a conversation that's happening everywhere. On the edge of it, it can be change makers. We can be part of this conversation and help shape the extremely valuable work that we all do into some form that supports self-determination, that supports agency for our peoples. It's sustainable. It doesn't trample on rights. It still deploys those amazing methodologies around asset-based, strength-based, rights-based practices that each of us are engaged in. But if you take that step back and not other someone else, but put yourself in our shoes. See, there I go again. I'm talking community, not me, but now I'm back with me as an Aboriginal person. So put yourself in our shoes. Colonisation is insidious. It is everywhere. What my First Nations friend talked about today around her slide, and Indigenous knowledges, and around permissions. I'm going to make you uncomfortable with this next conversation, I think, but I'm going to do it respectfully. We had awesome dancers yesterday from Bellew community. They were amazing little fellas, all of them, absolutely deadly. How many people thought to stop and ask permission before they took a photo of those kids? There's some amazing artwork in the breakout place, in the marketplace. How many people thought to take a photo of that? Sorry, how many people thought to ask permission before they took a photo of that amazing artwork? You aren't bad people. I'm not a bad person. But it's the way we operate with each other around that mutual obligation of respect and understanding. I put it to you that if that was your kids yesterday, little white kids, and they were your daughters or sons or little grannies, and we were taking photos, I reckon you'd feel a little uncomfortable. These are hard conversations. Can you see where I'm going with this? It is not easy as an Aboriginal woman to stand here and talk with you about decolonising processes, structures, behaviours. But we all need to do it. I need to do it. I do. I freely acknowledge that there are times when I have to pull myself up and go, whoa, whose thinking's that? You know, get that out of your head. I'm falling into the trap of colonisation. So please join me with this. I'm not trying to be moralistic. I'm not trying to tell you how to do things. I'm asking you to join me on this journey. Join me in this dialogue. It is a global change that we need, and you're already change makers. I know because of the work you do. I did heaps of research before this conference, and I looked up organisations and I looked up people, and I was thinking, man, how am I going to stand there and talk with you and try and unpack this a bit when I see the amazing work that you do? But you know what? How can I not? How can I not have that conversation? I might feel uncomfortable talking about it, you may feel uncomfortable hearing it, but we are all in this together for the right reasons to shift humanity. And I need you to help me with that.